My name is Susie. I'm 68 years old, and losing my only son Daniel was the worst pain I've ever felt. Then I learned he left me $34 million I never knew he had. At his funeral, his ex-wife Alicia, who abandoned him 15 years ago, walked in wearing designer black and demanded everything. When I refused, she threatened me. The next day, she showed up at my door with her lawyer, thinking she could intimidate a grieving mother. Before I tell you what happened when Alicia saw who was standing behind me on my porch, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you believe family is about loyalty, not just blood or legal ties. I raised Daniel by myself in our small town of Millfield, working as a nurse at County General Hospital. His father walked out when Daniel was just 3 years old, leaving us with nothing but a half-empty closet and a pile of unpaid bills. I took extra shifts whenever I could, sometimes working 16 hours straight to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. "Mom, why do you work so much?" Little Daniel asked me once when he was about 7. "Because I love you," I answered simply. And taking care of the people we love is the most important job in the world. Those early years were tough. I would drop Daniel at our neighbor, Mrs. Wilson's house, before my morning shifts and pick him up after dinner. Sometimes he'd already be asleep, and I'd carry him home, his small arms automatically wrapping around my neck, even in his dreams. On my rare days off, we'd do simple things that didn't cost money, like fishing at the creek or reading books from the library. Despite our financial struggles, Daniel was a happy child with an extraordinary mind. By 3rd grade, his teachers were calling me in for conferences, not because of problems, but because they'd never seen a child who could solve complex math problems so intuitively. When he was 10, he saved up his allowance money from mowing lawns to buy parts to build his own computer from scratch. "Mom, look what it can do," he'd exclaim, showing me programs he'd created that made no sense to me, but I'd smile and encourage him anyway. I worked 35 years at that same hospital, eventually becoming charge nurse in the pediatric ward. Every penny I could spare went into a college fund for Daniel. I was determined he would have opportunities I never had. When Daniel received a full scholarship to MIT, I cried for an hour straight. He was the first person in our family to attend college, and though I was heartbroken to see him go so far away, I knew this was his chance to build a different life. "I'll call you every Sunday, Mom, I promise," he said, as we hugged goodbye in his dormitory room, a space smaller than our living room back home. And he kept that promise faithfully. Every Sunday evening at 7, my phone would ring, and Daniel would share stories about his classes, his projects, and later, his business ideas. During his sophomore year, he created a software program in his dorm room that helped businesses organize customer data more efficiently. "Mom, I sold my app," he announced one Sunday, his voice bubbling with excitement. "A company paid me $20,000 for it." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I replied, not fully understanding the significance, but thrilled by his enthusiasm. "I'm so proud of you." That was just the beginning. By his senior year, Daniel had started his own small company, developing specialized software solutions for businesses. Despite his growing success, he never forgot where he came from. Every month, without fail, money would appear in my bank account. "Daniel, you don't need to do this," I'd protest. "You should be investing in your future." "I am investing in my future, Mom," he'd respond. "Taking care of you is part of that." I never changed my lifestyle much. I kept working my shifts at the hospital, living in the same modest 3-bedroom ranch house where Daniel grew up. I drove the same reliable sedan for 12 years, only replacing it when the repair bills became impractical. Some of my coworkers couldn't understand why I didn't retire early or buy a nicer home, especially as Daniel's company grew more successful. My son works hard for his money, I would tell them. It's his success, not mine. What made me proudest wasn't Daniel's business achievements, but the man he became. He established scholarships for kids from our hometown, donated to the hospital where I worked, and mentored young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. During his regular visits home, he'd still eat my homemade pot roast with the same enthusiasm as when he was a boy, even though I knew he now dined at restaurants where a single meal cost more than my weekly grocery bill. "This will always be the best food in the world, Mom," he'd say, helping himself to seconds. I knew Daniel was doing well financially, but he was modest about the details. I had no idea he had built a tech empire worth hundreds of millions. No idea that my son, who once wore hand-me-downs and discount store sneakers, had become one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. In my mind, he was still just my Daniel, the sweet boy who once made me a Mother's Day card out of cereal box cardboard and wildflowers from our backyard. I planned to retire at 70, with my nurse's pension, maybe travel a little if I could afford it. Never once did I imagine inheriting millions, or that my son would be gone before me. Daniel met Alicia when he was 25, about 2 years after his company really started taking off. She worked in marketing for a firm that was housed in the same office building as his growing business. They met in the elevator, or so the story goes. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special," Daniel told me during one of our Sunday calls. His voice had that giddy quality I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. "Her name is Alicia, and she's amazing." Their relationship moved quickly. Within 6 months, Daniel was flying me out to Boston to meet her. Alicia was undeniably beautiful, with perfectly highlighted blonde hair, impeccable makeup, and the kind of polished appearance that comes from having money. She had graduated from an expensive private university and came from what she called good family, though I later learned her family's wealth had largely disappeared, leaving only the name and the attitude. At first, Alicia was perfectly pleasant to me, complimenting my quaint hometown values and telling Daniel how sweet it was that he called his mother every week. She even asked for my pot roast recipe, though I doubt she ever used it. When they announced their engagement, after just 8 months of dating, I tried to hide my concerns. Everything seemed to be moving so fast, and something about Alicia felt calculated to me. But Daniel was happy, and that was what mattered. "She's been helping with the company's marketing strategy, Mom," Daniel explained. "She understands this world better than I do. We're a perfect team." They married in a lavish ceremony at a historic mansion in Newport. It was beautiful, but impersonal, with hundreds of guests, most of whom were business contacts rather than friends. I felt out of place in my department store dress, among women dripping in designer labels and jewelry. During the first year of their marriage, things seemed good. Alicia did contribute to Daniel's company, helping to polish its image and expand its client base. But as the business grew even more successful, I noticed changes in both of them. Daniel's Sunday calls became less regular. When we did talk, he seemed stressed, often cutting our conversation short because Alicia had planned some social event or business dinner. His visits home became rare, and when he did come, Alicia usually had an excuse not to join him. "She's really busy with her charity work," Daniel would explain, though he couldn't seem to name the specific charities when I asked. By their third anniversary, Daniel's company had gone public, making him wealthy, beyond anything our family had ever imagined. And with that wealth, Alicia's true colors began to show. I remember the Christmas they came to visit about 4 years into their marriage. Alicia spent most of the time on her phone, complaining about the limited cell service in my backwater town. She barely touched the holiday meal I'd spent days preparing and made a show of drinking bottled water rather than what came from my tap. The breaking point came when we exchanged gifts. I had made Daniel a quilt from his old t-shirts, from his high school robotics club to his college hackathons, preserved in a pattern that told the story of his journey. For Alicia, I had knitted a cashmere scarf in her favorite color, having saved up for months to afford the luxury yarn. Alicia opened her gift, held up the scarf with 2 fingers, as if it might contaminate her, and said, "How crafty. I suppose it's the thought that counts." Later, I overheard her telling Daniel, "Honestly, doesn't she realize we could buy an entire cashmere factory? These homemade gifts are just embarrassing." Daniel looked torn between defending me and keeping peace with his wife. He chose the latter, and something broke in our relationship that day. Over the next 2 years, Daniel became increasingly distant. I learned about his life through business magazines rather than our conversations. Alicia had fully integrated herself into high society, serving on museum boards and hosting exclusive fundraisers that seemed more about being seen than supporting causes. Then came the day that changed everything. Daniel called me, his voice hollow with shock. "She's gone, Mom," he said simply. Alicia left. While Daniel was on a business trip to Japan, Alicia had cleaned out their joint accounts, taking nearly $2 million, and disappeared. He returned to an empty penthouse and a cold note explaining she had outgrown their relationship. The betrayal was complete when Daniel discovered she'd been having an affair with one of his wealthy investors for over a year. "I feel so stupid, Mom," he confessed during a long, painful conversation. "I gave her everything, and it was never enough." Despite the prenuptial agreement Daniel had wisely insisted upon, Alicia's divorce demands were outrageous. She claimed she was instrumental to his success and deserved half of everything. After months of ugly legal battles that dragged Daniel's name through tabloid mud, he finally settled for a substantial sum just to make her go away, as he put it. "I don't even care about the money," he told me. "I just want this chapter closed." The divorce changed Daniel. He became more thoughtful, more appreciative of genuine relationships. He moved his company headquarters to a smaller city, away from the superficial world Alicia had pulled him into. Our weekly calls resumed, and he visited home more frequently. "I'm sorry I let her come between us," he said during one visit, helping me plant tomatoes in my backyard garden. "I promise I'll never let anyone do that again." For 15 years after the divorce, we never heard from Alicia. Daniel dated occasionally, but never remarried. He focused on growing his company ethically, becoming known for fair treatment of employees and significant philanthropic contributions. As for Alicia, I heard rumors through mutual acquaintances that she had remarried twice, both times, to wealthy men, both marriages ending quickly. Daniel never spoke her name again. It was as if those years had been excised from his life story. I respected his silence on the subject, never asking about her or the pain she had caused. I thought Alicia was firmly in our past, a painful lesson learned, but ultimately overcome. How wrong I was. I was washing dishes when I got the call. The familiar rhythm of soap rinse dry was interrupted by my phone's shrill ring. It was Michael Daniel's best friend and business partner. "Susie, you need to sit down," he said, his voice cracking. The next few moments exist in my memory like shattered glass. Car accident, rainy night, truck driver fell asleep, died instantly, didn't suffer. Words meant to comfort that couldn't penetrate the sudden crushing weight on my chest. My son, my only child, was gone at 45. The next week passed in a fog. Michael flew in immediately, handling arrangements I couldn't begin to comprehend. Other executives from Daniel's company arrived along with a team of attorneys I'd never met. They spoke in gentle tones about Daniel's estate, words like beneficiary and executor floating past me like autumn leaves. "Mrs. Johnson, you should know that Daniel left everything to you." The primary attorney, a kind-faced woman named Patricia, explained during a meeting at my kitchen table. "The full value is approximately $34 million, along with his properties, and controlling interest in the company." The number meant nothing to me. Millions or pennies. What did it matter? My son was gone. "He never told me," I said, staring at the paperwork before me. "Daniel was private about his wealth," Patricia explained. "He didn't want it to change your relationship." The funeral was held at the largest church in Millfield, the same one where I'd had Daniel baptized as a baby. The building overflowed with hundreds of people, many I'd never met. Tech industry leaders, charity directors, employees who spoke of Daniel's mentorship and kindness. The local paper called it the largest funeral in town history. I sat in the front row, Michael beside me, offering silent support. I'd insisted on speaking, despite concerns I might not make it through. My son wasn't defined by his success. I told the gathered mourners, my voice surprisingly steady. He was defined by his heart. Daniel remembered every birthday of every employee. He paid college tuition for the children of a janitor who worked in his first office building. He never forgot where he came from, and he lifted others as he climbed. That's his true legacy. As I returned to my seat, a commotion at the back of the church caught everyone's attention. The heavy doors swung open dramatically, and there stood Alicia, dressed in an expensive black designer dress that somehow managed to be both funeral appropriate and attention-seeking. A collective murmur rippled through the congregation. Many recognized her from the gossip columns and business news stories about their divorce 15 years earlier. She made her way down the center aisle as if it were a fashion runway, enormous sunglasses covering half her face, occasionally dabbing at invisible tears with a black handkerchief. The absolute audacity of her appearance after 15 years of silence stunned me into speechlessness. She attempted to seat herself in the family section beside me, but Michael firmly directed her to a seat several rows back. Throughout the service, Alicia's sobs were conspicuously loud at poignant moments, drawing attention away from genuine mourners. I focused on the pastor's words, on memories of Daniel, refusing to let her theatrical grief distract from honoring my son. After the service, as people offered condolences, Alicia maneuvered through the crowd until she stood directly before me. Age had been kind to her, or more likely, expensive procedures had been. She looked remarkably similar to when I'd last seen her, perhaps even more polished. "Susie, darling," she said, air-kissing near my cheeks. "What a tragedy. Daniel and I were so close, you know." The blatant lie froze me momentarily close. They hadn't spoken in 15 years. "Thank you for coming, Alicia," I managed, trying to step around her. She blocked my path, lowering her voice. We should talk about arrangements, about what Daniel would have wanted. He would have wanted me to be taken care of. The sheer audacity left me breathless. Behind me, I heard Michael step closer protectively. Daniel made his wishes very clear in his will. I replied, keeping my voice level, despite the anger bubbling up inside me. Wills can be contested, she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, especially when there were ongoing relationships and promises made. Daniel always told me he'd make things right between us eventually. Several nearby mourners had stopped to listen, their expressions ranging from shocked to disgusted. There was no relationship, Alicia, I stated firmly. You left him, took his money, and tried to destroy his reputation. Now please respect this day and leave us to grieve in peace. Her perfectly made-up face hardened. 34 million is a lot of money for a simple nurse who doesn't know the first thing about business or finance. Daniel would have wanted someone competent handling his legacy. What Daniel wanted, I said, my voice growing stronger, was for his mother to be secure for the rest of her life. Now excuse me. As Michael guided me away, Alicia called after me. This isn't over, Susie. I'll get what I deserve. Expect to hear from my attorney. Patricia, who had witnessed the exchange, immediately approached us. Don't worry about her threats, Mrs. Johnson. Daniel's will is ironclad. I nodded too emotionally, exhausted, to process Alicia's reappearance or her threats. I just wanted to go home, to be alone with my grief, in the house where I'd raised my son, surrounded by memories of a life well lived, rather than the circus this funeral had become. Take me home, Michael, I whispered. Please, just take me home. I spent that night looking through old photo albums. Daniel as a toddler, covered in birthday cake frosting. Daniel, missing his 2 front teeth, proudly holding up a science fair ribbon. Daniel in his graduation gown, the first Johnson ever to earn a college degree. A visual timeline of the life we had shared, now abruptly ended. Sleep refused to come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face, heard his laugh. The reality that I would never see him again, never hear his voice, kept hitting me in waves that left me gasping for breath. Dawn was just breaking when an aggressive pounding on my front door startled me from my grief-stricken stupor. I wrapped my robe tightly around myself and peered through the peephole. Alicia stood on my porch, perfectly coiffed despite the early hour, a tall man in an expensive suit beside her. I considered ignoring them, but the pounding continued loud enough to disturb my neighbors. Reluctantly, I opened the door, leaving the security chain engaged. What do you want, Alicia? It's not even 7 in the morning. We need to talk, Susie, she replied, her voice falsely sweet. This is Winston Blackwell, my attorney. May we come in? I hesitated, feeling vulnerable and unprepared for whatever confrontation they had planned. Before I could respond, Winston thrust his business card through the narrow opening. Mrs. Johnson, I represent Mrs. Winters in a matter concerning the estate of Daniel Johnson. It would be in your best interest to discuss this matter civilly. The formal use of Alicia's married name from her first husband, after Daniel, struck me as calculated an attempt to legitimize her claim on my son's estate. I'm not discussing anything without my own representation present, I replied, remembering Patricia's warning not to engage with them directly. This can be resolved simply, Alicia interjected. Sign over what rightfully belongs to me, and we can avoid a lengthy public legal battle. Think about it, Susie. Do you really want all your neighbors, your friends at the hospital, to watch you get dragged through court at your age? Her thinly veiled threat made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure. I'm not signing anything. Winston stepped forward, his expensive loafer nearly crossing my threshold. Mrs. Johnson, my client, has substantial evidence of an ongoing relationship with the deceased, including promises made regarding his estate. Fighting this will only deplete the very assets in question through legal fees. I was about to close the door when I heard footsteps behind me. A warm hand gently touched my shoulder. It was Michael, who had stayed in my guest room at my neighbor's insistence that I shouldn't be alone. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice calm but authoritative. Alicia's expression changed instantly, shock, and something like fear flashing across her features. She clearly hadn't expected Michael to be there. As Daniel's best friend and business partner, for over 20 years, Michael knew every detail of the disastrous marriage and ugly divorce. He had been there to pick up the pieces after Alicia left. "Michael," Alicia recovered quickly, switching to a flirtatious tone. "How nice to see you again. We were just explaining to Susie that there's an easy way to handle this unfortunate situation." "There's nothing to handle," Michael replied coolly. "And Mrs. Johnson won't be discussing anything without proper legal representation." Winston puffed up importantly. "I was just informing Mrs. Johnson that my client had a continuing relationship with Mr. Johnson that entitles her to consideration in the distribution of his estate." Michael pulled out his phone. "That's interesting, because I've been recording this conversation, and what you're describing sounds remarkably like attempted fraud." The color drained from Alicia's face. "You can't record us without consent." "Actually, in this state, only one party needs to consent to recording," Michael countered. "And as a resident of this house currently, I qualify. Now I suggest you both leave before I contact the police about harassment." Winston tugged at his tie nervously. "We'll be in touch through proper channels, Mrs. Johnson." As they turned to leave, Alicia paused, leaning in to whisper viciously, "You don't deserve that money. You're just a simple nurse who got lucky." The comment was meant to wound, to diminish me. Instead, it clarified everything. This woman who had abandoned my son when he needed her most saw nothing but dollar signs, where I saw the last connection to my child. "I didn't get lucky, Alicia," I replied, my voice steady. "I got a lifetime of loving my son, something you threw away for money once before. It seems you haven't learned your lesson." Her face contorted with rage, but Winston pulled her toward their waiting luxury car. "This isn't over," she called over her shoulder. "See you in court." As Michael closed and locked the door, my legs finally gave way. I sank onto the entryway bench, shaking. "How did you know to come downstairs right then?" I asked. "I heard voices," he explained, sitting beside me. "I'm so sorry you had to face that, especially today." What did she mean about evidence of an ongoing relationship Daniel never mentioned reconnecting with her? Michael's expression darkened. "Because he didn't. This is a complete fabrication. Alicia is desperate and grasping at straws." He immediately called Patricia, putting her on speakerphone to explain what had happened. Her response was swift and certain. "This is exactly the kind of stunt I was worried about. Don't worry, Mrs. Johnson. We'll handle this. In the meantime, don't speak to either of them again without one of us present." As Michael continued the conversation, I stared at the family photos lining my hallway. Daniel's school pictures, his college graduation, the opening of his first real office. In none of them did he look like the wealthy entrepreneur he'd become. In all of them, he looked like my son, smiling that slightly crooked smile I'd loved from the moment he was born. How had my quiet grief become this ugly battle? And how would I find the strength to fight it? 3 days later, Michael drove me to the headquarters of Daniel's company for a meeting with the legal team. It was my first visit to the gleaming glass building that bore my son's name, Johnson Technologies. The scale of what Daniel had built hit me anew as we entered the soaring lobby with its waterfall wall and sleek, modern furniture. Employees stopped to offer condolences as we passed. Many had tears in their eyes, speaking of Daniel's kindness, his mentorship, his genuine interest in their lives. It was clear he had been a beloved leader, not just a successful one. He talked about you all the time. One young programmer told me, her voice breaking. He said everything good in him came from you. In the executive conference room on the top floor, a team of 6 attorneys awaited us, led by Patricia. The wall of legal expertise should have been reassuring, but the gravity of their expressions told me Alicia's threats weren't being taken lightly. Mrs. Johnson, Patricia began after introductions, I want to assure you that Daniel's will is comprehensive and clear. He left everything to you with specific instructions about company management that involve Michael and the executive team. There is absolutely no provision for his ex-wife, whom he divorced 15 years ago. She slid a document across the table. In fact, there is a specific clause that states, and I quote, "My former spouse, Alicia Winters, shall inherit nothing from my estate under any circumstances." Daniel was explicitly clear about this. Then why are we here? I asked, bewildered by the formality of the meeting. Michael explained gently. Alicia has filed a lawsuit claiming she and Daniel had reconciled and that he had promised to change his will in her favor. She's seeking the entire inheritance. That's absurd, I gasped. They hadn't spoken in 15 years. Patricia nodded grimly. We know that. But Alicia is painting a very different picture for the court, and unfortunately, for the media. She pushed a tablet toward me, showing a gossip website. The headline made my stomach lurch. Tech billionaires, mother and ex-wife, battle over millions. Who really deserves the fortune? The article portrayed me as a simple, unsophisticated woman who couldn't possibly manage such wealth, while describing Alicia as Daniel's longtime love, who had remained close to him despite their official divorce. This is all lies, I whispered, pushing the tablet away. Completely, Patricia agreed. But Alicia has hired a top-notch PR firm to spin this narrative. She's giving interviews painting herself as the grieving, almost widow. Why would she do this? She must know she has no case. The youngest attorney on the team, James, spoke up. We've been investigating Ms. Winters' financial situation. She's essentially broke. Her last divorce left her with minimal assets, and she's accumulated significant debt maintaining her lifestyle. This lawsuit is a desperate play. Our investigation also revealed that she attempted to contact Daniel multiple times in the last 2 years as her financial situation deteriorated. Another attorney added. He never responded. The team explained that Alicia's legal strategy hinged on creating enough doubt and negative publicity that I might settle rather than endure a prolonged public battle. She had already produced emails allegedly from Daniel discussing reconciliation, though the authentication was questionable. She's also paid several witnesses who claim Daniel spoke of reuniting with her. Patricia continued. None of them are credible under scrutiny, but it creates confusion in the media narrative. The thought of fighting this public battle while still processing my grief seemed overwhelming. What are our options? I asked weakly. We could settle, Patricia acknowledged. Offer her a smaller sum to go away quietly. Or we can fight this all the way, which I personally recommend, given the clear evidence on our side. Michael, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Daniel would want us to fight. He wouldn't want Alicia to get a penny after what she did to him. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken history. There's something else you should know, Mrs. Johnson, Patricia said carefully. If we proceed to court, Alicia's team will likely attempt to portray Daniel in an unflattering light to strengthen her position. They may suggest he was unstable, manipulative, or that he made verbal promises he didn't document. It will get ugly. The thought of my son's reputation being tarnished in death was more painful than any financial consideration. But the alternative, giving in to Alicia's extortion, felt like a betrayal of Daniel's explicit wishes. I straightened my shoulders, finding resolve in my anger. Daniel spent his whole life protecting me. Now it's my turn to protect his legacy. The decision made the team outlined our counterattack, a motion to dismiss Alicia's claims as frivolous, a defamation suit for her false statements, and a comprehensive media strategy to correct the public narrative. As the meeting concluded, Patricia pulled me aside. This won't be easy, Mrs. Johnson. Are you sure you want to proceed? I thought of Daniel, of his integrity and determination. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The next 6 months were the hardest of my life. Grieving for Daniel while fighting Alicia's vicious legal battle taxed every ounce of my strength. The media coverage intensified, photographers occasionally appearing outside my modest home, hoping to catch a glimpse of the simple nurse at the center of the multi-million-dollar inheritance dispute. Alicia gave tearful interviews describing a secret reconciliation with Daniel in the years before his death. We were planning our future together, she claimed to a sympathetic talk show host. He promised to make things right, to take care of me always. Her theatrical performances made me physically ill. The woman had moral flexibility that defied comprehension, inventing an entire relationship that never existed, all for money. Meanwhile, I continued living in my modest home, driving my old car, working part-time at the hospital, despite no longer needing the income. The familiar routine helped keep me grounded amid the chaos. The $34 million sat untouched in accounts I barely understood, feeling more like a burden than a blessing. My coworkers and neighbors rallied around me, bringing casseroles and offering support. "We know who you are, Susie," my friend Clara from the hospital told me. "No one who knows you believes those awful stories." Michael became my rock during this period, handling media inquiries and keeping me updated on legal developments while shielding me from the worst of it. We developed a friendship independent of Daniel, united in our love for him and our determination to honor his wishes. One evening in early autumn, about 6 months into the legal battle, a courier delivered a plain manila envelope to my door. No return address, just my name typed on a label. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. "Mrs. Johnson, I worked as Alicia Winter's personal assistant for the past year. What she's doing to you is wrong." The attached files contain emails and messages that prove she's been planning this for years, tracking Daniel's wealth and calculating how to get back into his life when it reached a certain threshold. "I quit last week, and she doesn't know I copied these files. I can't be part of this cruel scheme anymore. I'm sorry for your loss." The note was unsigned, the handwriting neat but hurried. I immediately called Patricia, who sent a tech specialist to retrieve and authenticate the files. What they found was damning beyond our wildest hopes. emails from Alicia to friends discussing Daniel as her backup plan if her current relationship fell through, spreadsheets tracking his company's valuation and estimated personal wealth, messages calculating exactly when his net worth reached a level that would make putting up with that tech nerd worth it again, drafts of messages attempting to reconnect that apparently were never sent or were ignored. Most damning was a message to a friend just 3 months before Daniel's death. If I can just get back into his life, I can work on getting back into his will. 30 million would solve all my problems. The legal team was ecstatic. This evidence would destroy Alicia's fabricated narrative of ongoing love and promises. We have a deposition scheduled next week, Patricia told me. This changes everything. We'll present these documents then when she's under oath. The atmosphere in the deposition room was tense. Alicia arrived dressed in somber but expensive clothes that somehow managed to be both conservative and attention-grabbing. She offered me a cold smile as she took her seat across the table. For nearly 2 hours, she spun an elaborate fiction about her relationship with Daniel after their divorce. Secret meetings, heartfelt reconciliations, promises of a future together. She claimed they had maintained a discreet relationship to avoid public scrutiny, and that Daniel had verbally promised to change his will to include her. Daniel told me he never stopped loving me, she said, dabbing at non-existent tears. He said his mother would be taken care of with a small portion, but that I was his future. I sat silently, letting Patricia guide the questioning, drawing Alicia deeper into her web of lies. With each question, she added more detail, more specific claims about dates and conversations that never happened. And you maintain that you and Mr. Johnson were planning a future together at the time of his death? Patricia asked, her tone neutral. Absolutely. Alicia nodded emphatically. We were just waiting for the right moment to go public with our reconciliation. Patricia slid a folder across the table. I'd like to enter these documents as evidence. These are emails from your personal account, Ms. Winters. Would you please read the highlighted portion of this first one, dated February 3rd of last year? Alicia's confident expression faltered as she scanned the document. Her eyes widened in recognition, and she looked up sharply, seeking her attorney's intervention. I don't recognize this document, she claimed, pushing it away. Really? Because the digital signature and authentication confirm it came from your account. Perhaps I should read it for you. Patricia didn't wait for an answer. Just need to be patient a little longer. According to Forbes, DJ's net worth hit $280 million this quarter. Time to reconnect with my tech nerd and get what I deserve from him. If he doesn't respond to my overtures, there are other ways to get what's mine. The color drained from Alicia's face. Her attorney requested a brief recess, but Patricia continued relentlessly. Or perhaps this one from a text exchange with your friend Melissa. Who cares if he doesn't want to see me when he dies? I'll contest whatever will exists. His mother is a simple nurse who won't have the stomach for a court battle. Alicia's attorney jumped in. These documents haven't been authenticated. We reserve the right to challenge their validity. They've been fully authenticated by digital forensics experts, Patricia countered smoothly. We have dozens more, like them, all painting a clear picture of Ms. Winters' true intentions. Alicia's facade finally cracked. Those are private communications taken out of context, she snapped. So you do recognize them? Patricia asked innocently. Realizing her mistake, Alicia looked frantically toward her attorney, who was already writing a note, likely advising her to stop talking. We need a break, her attorney insisted. Just one more question, Patricia said. Ms. Winters, did you have any contact whatsoever with Daniel Johnson in the 5 years prior to his death? The trap was set perfectly. If Alicia said yes, we had phone records and Daniel's detailed calendar proving otherwise. If she said no, her entire claim of an ongoing relationship collapsed. The silence stretched uncomfortably before Alicia exploded. "This is ridiculous. Of course we had contact. You think I'd build my case on something so easily disproven? So you admit you're building a case rather than telling the truth," Patricia pressed. "That's not what I meant," Alicia backpedaled. "I meant my claim. Your claim that you've been fabricating evidence to support," Patricia finished for her. Alicia's attorney called for an immediate end to the deposition, but the damage was done. As they gathered their materials to leave, Alicia's carefully maintained composure shattered completely. "You never deserved a son like Daniel," she shouted at me across the table. "I should have been the one to inherit everything." Her attorney physically pulled her from the room as she continued her tirade, her true character finally fully exposed. Patricia immediately filed a motion to dismiss the case based on fraudulent claims. The judge, after reviewing the evidence, not only granted our motion, but issued a scathing rebuke of Alicia and her legal team for bringing a clearly fraudulent claim. In a final blow, the court ordered Alicia to pay all our legal costs, an amount that would further devastate her already precarious finances. As we left the courthouse, after the judge's ruling, Patricia squeezed my hand. "It's over, Susie. She can't hurt you or Daniel's memory anymore." The victory felt hollow in some ways, overshadowed by the grief that still dominated my days. But there was also a sense of justice, of having protected Daniel's wishes and his legacy from someone who had only wanted to exploit him in death as she had in life. With the legal battle behind me, I returned to my quiet life, still struggling to reconcile my modest existence with the enormous inheritance that was now irrevocably mine. The $34 million felt almost abstract numbers on paper that had no real connection to my daily reality. "What am I supposed to do with all this money, Michael?" I asked one evening as we sat on my back porch. "It feels wrong, somehow, having so much when Daniel is gone." "You don't have to decide everything at once," he assured me. "Take your time, figure out what feels right." Time passed. The leaves changed, then fell, marking the first anniversary of Daniel's death. I took a leave of absence from the hospital, finding it increasingly difficult to maintain my normal routine while processing both grief and sudden wealth. During this period, I spent more time at Daniel's city apartment, which I had initially avoided out of pain. The modern minimalist space felt foreign to me, nothing like the warm, cluttered home we had shared. But as I sorted through his belongings, I began to find pieces of the son I knew amid the trappings of the successful businessman he'd become. In his home office, I discovered a leather-bound journal in the desk drawer. Opening it hesitantly, I recognized Daniel's distinctive handwriting. It wasn't a daily diary, but rather a collection of thoughts, ideas, and reflections spanning several years. Many entries mentioned me, memories of our life together, gratitude for the sacrifices I'd made. One passage, in particular, caught my eye. "Mom called today, excited about the hospital's new pediatric wing. She spent 30 years caring for other people's children with such dedication. I wonder if she knows how much that shaped me. Every business decision I make, I ask myself if it would make her proud. Would this help people the way she's always helped people? Would this be honest and fair, the way she taught me to be one day? When I'm gone, hopefully many years from now, all this wealth will go to her. I know she'll never spend much on herself. That's not who she is. But I hope she'll find ways to extend her natural compassion through these resources. Create opportunities for kids, like I was, support caregivers, like she's always been. That would be the best legacy I could leave. Tears blurred my vision as I read his words. For the first time since receiving the inheritance, I felt a sense of purpose forming. This money wasn't just about financial security for me. It was Daniel's way of extending his reach, of continuing to do good in the world. With this new perspective, I began working with Michael and financial advisors to establish the Daniel Johnson Foundation. We created 3 main initiatives: scholarships for underprivileged students interested in technology, support for single parents pursuing education or career advancement, and funding for pediatric healthcare innovations. I decided to remain in my modest home, but did accept one significant change. Michael convinced me to hire Elaine, a kind-hearted woman in her 50s, as a part-time housekeeper and assistant. Having help with daily tasks freed me to focus on developing the foundation and processing my grief in healthier ways. News about Alicia occasionally reached me through mutual acquaintances. After her humiliating legal defeat, she had moved abroad, reportedly seeking a new wealthy husband in European social circles. Her name faded from gossip columns, her brief notoriety as the gold-digging ex, forgotten by all but those directly involved. I found that as time passed, my anger toward her diminished, not because she deserved forgiveness, but because holding on to that bitterness took energy I preferred to direct elsewhere. The best revenge, as they say, was living well and honoring Daniel's memory properly. The first group of Daniel's kids, as I affectionately called our scholarship recipients, was selected about 18 months after his death. 20 bright, determined young people from backgrounds similar to Daniel's childhood, full of potential but lacking resources. At the award ceremony, I shared stories of Daniel's early life, his homemade computers, and determination to learn despite limited means. I wanted these young people to know they weren't receiving charity, but investment, the same kind of investment I had made in Daniel through years of love and sacrifice. Success isn't measured by the money you accumulate, I told them. It's measured by the lives you touch, the positive change you create. Daniel understood that, and I hope you will too. Watching these young people begin their journeys, I felt Daniel's presence strongly. Not in a mystical sense, but in the continuation of values and opportunities. His money was creating ripples that would extend far beyond what either of us could have imagined during those early years when we struggled to make ends meet. On what would have been Daniel's 47th birthday, Michael and several of Daniel's close friends joined me for a small memorial gathering at my home. We shared stories and laughter, celebrating his life rather than mourning his absence. I think Daniel would be proud of what you've done with his legacy, Michael told me as the evening wound down. You've honored him in the perfect way. The inheritance that had initially felt like a burden had transformed into a vehicle for purpose. I still missed Daniel every day, still had moments when grief would overwhelm me unexpectedly. But I had found a way forward, a way to ensure that the values that defined our life together continued to flourish. As I watched the first sunset of my 7th decade from my familiar back porch, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent since Daniel's death. The money hadn't changed who I was fundamentally, the mother who had worked extra shifts and sacrificed for her child. But it had amplified my ability to care for others, to create opportunities, to extend the same kind of love and support I had always given Daniel to a wider circle. You're still taking care of me, Daniel, I whispered to the evening sky. And now, I'm taking care of others in your name. The true inheritance, I realized, wasn't the millions in the bank accounts. It was the values we had shared, the love that had defined our relationship, and the opportunity to extend that legacy beyond the boundaries of our small family. In the end, what survived wasn't wealth, but purpose, not possessions, but principles. Has someone in your life taught you that true wealth goes beyond money? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of finding meaning through life's challenges. And don't forget to share this with someone who might need a reminder that our legacy is built through love, not material things. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the greatest inheritance we receive isn't measured in dollars, but in the values and purpose we carry forward.